You good? All right, I'll call this board of selectmen's meeting to order for October 13th. Roll call, Bill Crossman, Donald Poole, myself, Pam Alley, Jake Thompson, Andrew Dorr, town manager, and Elizabeth Bunker, deputy town clerk, is taking minutes. Approve agenda. I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Donald Poole. All those in favor? Oh, we don't have too late now. Approve the minutes from the September 29th meeting. We'll do the October 7th meeting at a later date. I mentioned to add it, but I didn't.
So moved.
Moved by Donald Poole. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Phil Crossman. All those in favor? Approve and sign treasurer's warrant number 15. So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Donald Poole. All those in favor? Seeing no communications, speakers from the floor. Anybody? Just Gabe?
Leave Matt around there, but we'll be giving updates.
All right. Committee and department reports and appointments. Planning department updates.
Hi guys, thank you. I just wanted to give you a few updates of where things are at with the downtown Main Street project. The last time we talked about it, you were allocating funding, and we just wanted to let you know we're working on a new stream of funding that could possibly assist us. It's the FEMA just released a new set of mitigation funds called Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, BRIC funding. So we're hoping to combine BRIC and EDA to get to where we need to be without having to eliminate the parking lot projects in the overall proposal. So we'll keep you posted. We should know more this week, and we should have a better idea of how those funding streams might come together. Any questions on that? Okay. And then to update you on our committee assessment and best practices, this is the one of the projects that our fellow Matt is working on. We have solicited input from committee chairs and are still getting some of that information back through surveys. We also wanted to ask you what your overall thoughts were on the expectations you have for committees, how committees are formed and supported by the town. And we were wondering how you would prefer to offer that information. Would it be best for us to discuss it during a meeting? Would you like us to also send you a brief questionnaire? What would be your preference?
I'm not sure I understand.
So we've talked a lot about sort of expectations for committees, and then also about how to increase overall effectiveness and support committees. And so this is a project that we've been working on. We would like to know what the select board's expectations and thoughts are for, say, for example, how often committees report, what sort of policy or protocol they should be following in terms of how often they meet, etc. So we wanted to solicit your opinion about that, and we were wondering what the best way to do that would be. What would be your preference?
Why don't we brainstorm between now and that meeting on the 27th and
Perfect.
Put it on the agenda for them, along with, what the various chairs have to say.
Super. Okay, great. Thank you. And then just to give you an update, we are continuing to work on the website redesign. So that is coming along. We should have some new interface prototypes to look at fairly soon. And we're hoping either by the end of October or early November to be able to just launch a refreshed looking website that's a bit more up to date and user friendly. So The other piece we wanted to update you on from last time was the Community Development Corporation Committee that you formed at the last meeting. We are moving forward with that. We do not have any additional members to add because Sam Thompson agreed to serve on the committee. So we have a full 7-member committee plus 1 alternate. So we are good to go with that. And if you guys are fine with that roster, that what you are, since you voted everyone in, we'll just proceed with that. Any questions or anything to follow up with that? Okay. And then I'm gonna just give a couple of other quick committee updates, nothing crucial, but we are coming closer to presenting the broadband report to you. That's, the report based on the RFP that was initiated last year. So the committee, I think, is intending to present, I think maybe at the meeting on the 27th. We'll see how that goes. So they will be bringing you a recommendation as well as a overview of the report. Any questions on that? Okay, and then just lastly, just updating you on the Sea Level Rise Committee. I think I mentioned this last time that we did install markers around the community, sort of the downtown area. So there are these sort of staff gauges that show water levels, and you will be seeing from time to time students as well as the data collection team going out at King Tide events. So there's one coming up this weekend, so they will be out and about. We will start to publicize that, but if any community members are listening and are interested in that project, or any of the just interested in citizen science and sea level rise in general, my contact information is on the screen, so feel free to reach out to me directly. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, and I think I did say this before, we are involved in a grant with GMRI, Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Actually, 2 grants were involved in with them. And we are going to be receiving some funding for that, which will support my position and the work that we're doing with that grant. So just giving you an update on that. And that was $7,500. So we get to use that this fiscal year, and we can also extend it to next fiscal year if we want to. Any questions on anything?
What do the sea level rise markers relate to? What is the reference point?
The reference point. So there's measured. So there's a 0, which is mean high water, and so they're just measuring above, or we measure high tide. So we measure high tide events. So anything above mean high water, and they were set using specific criteria, which I was not involved in, but we should have a report about that soon that anybody can read that report and see how we arrived at those heights and where we placed the gauges. We used a transit and level and some, I think, MGS map information.
Okay.
Thank you, Gabe.
Okay, thank you.
Planning Department updates. Just a bit. Oh, okay. No commissioners then.
I thought Charlie retired. How come his name's up? He's on here. He's been sticking around.
We've been just working as needed on the ditching stuff. If we need to, have flaggers or truck drivers, he's able to film it. So we talk about some of that work. We'll be scaling back just as we approach winter. Will be available for driving plow truck, but
That's good.
less regular.
The ditching has really been impressive.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I've been impressed. I've stopped and told them as much.
We'll see if it works, if it actually gets some rain.
Sounded this weekend, tonight too.
Between the rain and what happens in the wintertime, to be able to get, snow and whatever off the road and be able to get it in conditions away from the road. Hopefully there's less ice buildup on the roads as well, some of these places too, so. 500, which is the older of the dump trucks. It had some issues with horsepower, and so we just got a quote on being able to fix that. There was a couple of leaks in the air tank, some front and rear brakes, a few other pieces to do with the axle and the cross members. But just that's been over there for a couple of months now, so we haven't used it since like the end of last plow season. So it's finally due to get some work, but just a reminder of its age and continued non-routine maintenance needs. Not proposing anything, just an update on that. And that bill's estimated to be about $6,000.
Okay. Old business, public works garage, action on contractor. We never did approve the contractor.
Yeah, the last meeting, you approved the work to have the mills excavation, do the site prep work for the salt shed, the ramp into the, ramping the building, grading it off the existing building to enter on the side, and for them to install the septic system. But we didn't, where there were still some questions about what work would be done inside, we held off on selecting Sheridan, if that's who the recommendation is to work with, until we had that workshop.
The town works with Sheridan Construction to make renovations that are consistent with what are current recommendations.
Second.
Second by Pam Alley. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, new business. Certificate of settlement, 2020 taxes.
The one I have to sign.
That's another one, yeah.
So this one looks like I'm going on my packet. I don't know. Are we signing this now?
I move we sign it. I forget.
That's where I was kind of getting.
Second. All those in favor?
Doesn't matter which line.
The balance due is 0, I have for that.
Well, it's showing there's 84,000 plus left out unpaid from last year's tax bill. The balance is 0, so that the treasurer or the tax collector is not personally held responsible for the remaining balance.
Oh, I see.
That we filed the liens, the unpaid for last year was 84,000. So that's been liened.
But that's been filed and those have been sent out to the.
Yeah, a couple of them have already come back in and paid.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit lower than it usually has been, which is great.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good try. What is it, typical 10%?
Somewhere in that ballpark. I can look it up and get more exact numbers if you want.
I was just curious. I was someone that's probably somewhere between 5 and 10%.
Yeah, I've seen it as high as over 100,000 before.
I told you last year, didn't I? So now that you moved in and got everything.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, but then I also forgot.
Mine jumped up double when I finally. My house wasn't done when they came one year, then the next year.
Yeah.
It was done and I still.
All right. We get to a quick one, indeed. Things that you guys would go for. Stop running the big thing.
Okay, Eric, that's
It's
good.
just releasing our interest in a foreclosed piece of property after having been paid off. So
I move we sign a quick indeed.
Second.
Second by Pam Alley. All those in favor? Fantastic.
Who's the witnesses on here?
I would be, I guess, anyone that's watching.
So we've got to change the ambulance billing fees because of the new rates for PIA. Is that what we have to do?
Can't get one by you, Jake.
Have you crunched any numbers on that community lights thing? Or do you know what they've been doing? What was it called?
Yeah, we can bring that up in the report, and then his report.
It
So
is.
we can circle back on that later.
Okay.
Okay, ambulance billing fees.
So with the recent change in PIA's rates, it wasn't known to us that we've had 2 additional charges on the bill in the last few weeks. One is for the return flight of the EMT that goes with the patient. That's not something that's been assessed to us before. It was just included in the emergency trip fee. So the base price is $600. The return trip is, if not shared, $235. With the transfer to the other ambulance service to get the patient to the hospital is another $125, which we did account for in the increase, the new rate back in July. So when I looked at it, the other fee that was kind of new was an after-hours fee, and so previous contract had it set out that, the service would be available for emergency flights. I think it was till, I want to say 7 or 8 p.m. During certain times of the year. Otherwise, I think it was either 4 or 5 p.m. So it was an after-hours fee, which is also another new one to us. And that was, I believe, $150. I don't know if that represents overtime or however it works on their end. It is presumably what it is, but currently our ambulance rates don't, with those additional charges, aren't coming close to being able to bill for that actual amount. So I think if all of those charges had to be applied, it was as much as, I think, $1,160 potentially. What I did is I just kind of weighted it and assumed that 85 of those trips, we on average running about 100 flights off the island with patients in the year. I weighted it so that 85 of those trips would be during the daytime without a shared flight return. 12 of those would be after hours, and 3 of those would be an overnight stay of the EMT. And that came out, if I weighted that and averaged that out, it came out to $975 per flight. And so the proposal would be to just have a flat fixed fee of $975, and that's what, they would bill what they would bill, and then we just know that that's what the charge would be if we charge a patient to fly.
Why isn't it they just get billed, what they actually have to pay?
So we get billed directly by PIA, right? So when we send a bill for the service to the billing company we use, we take all of those and put it as one fee relative to the cost of the plane. You can't, we're getting charged an admin fee for the other service if they have to bring in another paramedic from a neighboring community. There's an additional charge on that potentially. And so when you have all these other things, you can't then just add that as an add-on item to be billed to the insurance company. And so we'd have to bundle that as this is the cost for the flight, for our service to send someone over. And so that's the bill that goes to the billing, or the statement that goes to the billing company that then gets mailed to send to the insurance company or the patient.
So you have to know before you get the bills from the other people, you have to send it out. Okay. It seems like whoever's using the service should get billed for whatever they are, instead of.
Yeah,
Well,
That's fine with me, I was just curious why.
Yeah, the challenge we have with the insurance company is already a challenge to collect the airplane fee as it is. And so in our mind, if it's just whatever the plane services fee has to be, it'll be that. But in terms of billing, unless we want to go and figure out every scenario possible, we need that on the billing rate sheet in order to send a bill to the insurance company and the patient. So either we average out what the cost would be and just say, this is the fee that we'll charge a patient. Sometimes it'll be higher, the cost will be higher, sometimes the cost will be a little bit lower. But unless we want to account for all those different scenarios and costs that would come to us and have a different charge for each of those scenarios, you just proposing charging an average cost for those.
You think that's going to be enough?
For this year. Unless there's other changes in price.
Well, that's why I was wondering why you didn't just say $1,000. It's $975, and there's some wiggle room there, but $975 will cover it. That's fine with me.
I move we approve the bill tonight. Anything by Mike, second by Donald Poole. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, we need to set a date for our public hearing for the general assistance amendment.
How are we doing that?
Work out.
How are we doing the public hearings? In the school auditorium or?
I'd propose that we encourage people to submit information ahead of time or questions ahead of time if they have them, to attend virtually.
We can do that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm gonna recommend. I mean, it's a public hearing, not a vote of the, of the budget and that kind of thing. I mean, I can reach out to to the GA or the DHHS office to understand they didn't provide the guidance during COVID how we would do that. Presumably, if we can avoid having to go to the school.
Presumably because for these two items, it wouldn't be a huge deal anyway for people. They could just supply comment or, ask to be on the Zoom or whatever it is.
If the weather's nice enough and there are, voters that come, we could also try and do it outside. Sure enough, we could get away with that. We know we don't meet the square foot requirement to allow more than what we have in here now.
We can open the windows up and put ladders and they can look through. No, I'm just curious.
So if we want to at least have the public hearing, there are multiple ways people could submit comments at least, comments or questions. So if we want to do that, until I hear back from the state on guidance for actually having the vote, we could either, if we have the information we need before the 27th, we can advertise it on that agenda, or we look for what the guidance says and try something different. But in terms of the public hearing, we could, I think we could reasonably still provide that comment period for people to submit. And almost 2 weeks in advance, but if we approve it for the 27th.
Yeah, I move we set a public hearing date for the general assistance ordinance for 5:30 PM, October 27th.
Can you combine that with the roads and winter maintenance?
And
One motion?
Yeah, I'll include that for an additional public hearing to follow the general assistance ordinance for road closures. They do have to be two separate public hearings out there.
And I don't know if you want to just confirm the road closure drafted list. It's just what we've had in the past, with more people potentially staying longer this year. I don't know if we want to consider not closing any winter maintenance this year, or how you want to handle that, because there might be some people staying at places that they hadn't usually.
Well, I mean, if we have the public hearing 2 weeks from now,
And then people can weigh in and say, hey, I'm going to still be here.
Right.
So
yeah,
if those are the roads we've closed in the past, I don't see why we'll be changing this year.
right.
So 5:30 on the 21st, is that?
27th. It'll be right before our selectmen's meeting.
You said 5:30 though, it's the same time, we're just having it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special town meetings first, and then
It'll be
regular,
usually.
sorry, public hearings.
Okay, so is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Donald Poole. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, raise my hand. Surplus equipment items for sale.
Someone had inquired about buying the chipper a couple weeks ago. They might still be interested, but just a reminder that we do have the chipper, and I don't think it's been used for at least a year, if not 2 years now. Dan's opinion on that is that it doesn't meet the requirements we need to continue to operate it as a public service entity, the town government. It doesn't have some of the safety features that OSHA would require today for us to use.
I mean, that call up at the top is an OSHA approved.
I'm not sure. So, if someone privately wants to buy it, it's something that if you wanted to put up for sale, you just see for someone that has any interest in it.
What was the bid for?
I didn't get a bid. I just said someone was interested in it. We want to sell it.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, someone had asked similarly, knowing that we hadn't really used it a couple of years ago, and asked them at the time that we were fixing it up, and
For private use, I'm sure it's just fine.
Yeah, the town can't.
Put it out, I'd say put it out there for sale or bid, or however we do it.
Yeah.
Would you get bids, or just if someone offers you money, would you sell it? Do you have to do bids?
well, you would be choosing, the town warrant gives the board the authority to decide how the surplus equipment sells.
So if someone makes us an offer, then it's just.
So you could,
You get 5 bids.
normally you would do a pull bid process, right? Like we did in past property or the whole thing.
Last year.
Yeah.
And that way it's
We're gonna hire an
fair
outside.
process.
I know. I just wondered if someone said, Andy, I'll give you $200 for it. Andy could just say, yes, go drag that to your house off my property.
I'm hoping we'll get more.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just making it.
Don't give them ideas.
there's a range of what these can resell for. There aren't a ton of them necessarily with this age, but did find a few online that do range. The hours on it are low relative to some of the other ones I've seen.
I will put that, check it out today.
Do you want to put a minimum on it or just see what you get?
Just to see what we get, and have to accept.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it right to bed.
Second.
Second by Donald Poole. All those in favor? Report from town manager. Well, what he's not done. Yeah.
Don't ask him any questions.
On the airport extension piece, I did come across today a study that was done in 1990 for a different orientation of the runway. Because the town was considering that years ago. It's relevant because it does show where the property lines are relative to that runway. Runway we have today. Assuming there's no change in the length of the runway itself, it does show at that time that there was 300 feet, between 250 and 300 feet of our land until the property line. So with that, we could, easy enough to do an aerial measurement or do a on-site measurement of what and if it's still the same distance length as it was in 1990 on that map, then we know that we can be fairly confident that the runway relative to that property line hasn't changed. So just bring it up to ask if you wanted to use that as the reference and go forward with and forego the survey today, or if you want to continue with that survey.
And you said reorient the runway?
No, there was a study in 1990 that called for it to be reoriented. So I have the plans that show where it would be, but in doing that, they had the current layout. And so you can clearly see where the current lines are and where the property lines were.
So you don't feel that we need to have this survey? Why would we pay $7,000 or $8,000 if we don't need to? Right?
Yeah, great.
I only want to ensure that, we're not.
As long as the runway today still measures at 1,500 square or 1,500 feet.
I don't think anything's really changed on it besides them putting the lights on. What's really been done to it in the last year?
I don't think anything.
In the last 25, he said 1990 even is what he said.
Yeah.
About 200.
What, it'll be a 99?
Great. Yeah, we could. I showed Eric earlier, so if you wanted to forego for right now,
If we save money, we save money.
Yeah, survey would cost that.
They were saying somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000, right? Depending on how many hours.
260 to 250 from this corner. You could put the angle.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You got 300 feet there.
Okay. So how much are we looking to extend it again? I can't remember.
They think they were asking, I believe, for 200.
And then cut some trees down more at the end, right?
Well, I think the trees, even today, in some places need to be cut down. They mentioned that again when I talked to someone today on the Loring property across the road, that hilltop where there's a few up there. There's about a dozen trees up there that should be cut down.
And we can do that.
Now you have to, does that involve the land trust on that property?
It's in the overlay, it's in the airport zoning district. It's not clear to me, because it's probably only been done a handful of times, if at all, since that was created. Whose responsibility that was set out to be? I assume it's ours, because it's.
Right. I just know there's an easement there somewhere.
It could be. Town zoning calls for it to be clear in that district, so
Right.
I can coordinate with her, but I assume.
Yeah.
They were going to do a
I
new runway at 2,500 feet.
At one point, they were talking about a runway at 2,500 feet, but that's not what we're talking about today. It was interesting to find that study in the files in the back room there.
Probably they wanted jets to land here, like if I'm not mistaken.
On the law enforcement, the county's lawyer is still reviewing the contract, apparently. I didn't realize there was enough changes there that there was any significant concern. I did include Eric on a couple of emails that went back and forth last week between me and the county administrator and our commissioner that represents us. The sheriff did weigh in, and my concern was that they only meet once a month, and if it wasn't on the October agenda, we'd wait till November potentially for them to now review it and sign it. we're putting another month off for that second deputy and additional coverage. So they responded saying it doesn't necessarily mean they could call a separate special meeting just for that item. The sheriff did seem tentatively confident or hopeful that there was a candidate or someone who expressed interest, who has previous law enforcement experience and is currently employed elsewhere. So there's some hope that there would be a quicker transition or turnaround time on it once signed. So hoping to hear more this week on that, and they can move forward. I don't anticipate any challenge or issues with what we had presented them, but until their lawyer reviews it, I guess we have to wait and see. With the Gallimander, I haven't been able to find anyone or find good solutions to removing it from that site temporarily to put the excavation work and the slab down. So I propose that we continue to find a safe and reasonable way to move that, but in the meantime, just prepare to wrap the building, so we don't go another winter without it covered, and then just continue over the winter to find a means to move that without rolling it on its wheels if possible. That was highly recommended.
Probably the best thing to do would be to just take that whole cover off, since it needs to be replaced anyway. Maybe, I'm not saying now, but then you could get some kind of a crane and a sling in there to move the thing, then put the slab down, and then put some kind of a new roof over it, because it's obviously pretty right, but we should be thinking about that instead of piecemealing this stuff. I mean, it would be cheaper to do it all at once than to move the Gallimander, to put a slab in, and come back in 2 years later to put a roof over it. We should try and maybe think about this for the budget next year to try and have all this work done next summer.
Yeah.
If the town's in agreement that it needs to be done, wrap it for this winter, because like you said, it's already almost November. We got to get it covered, and then we should think about just replacing that whole roof, and then there could be plexiglass pieces that go in around the side, to cover it in the winter, so people could still view it or something. I mean, there's got to be a better option than moving it 2 or 3 times. We should try and limit it to one move to do everything. It's my opinion.
Great idea.
I mean, it's a lot of the tape would be done.
Right, but I mean, but if we were to do the slab and then we want to do the roof some other time, we probably would have to move it again, because you don't want stuff to fall on it. So we should think about this as one project instead of 2 or 3.
Yep. The COVID grant period's wrapping up this month, so just going to make some final purchases that we need in the building here, and other town employees need to continue operating safely. So just an update on that. The audits started, pulling information together for that, and the hope is to have all that ready by the end of next week, if not sooner. The server and computer upgrades are finally being scheduled. Hopefully that'll be done before the end of the month, and with that we'll be able to upgrade the bookkeeping software. Some of the employees will end up with laptops that have Windows 10 on them. We'll shift some of the other ones that had Windows 10 to the library as planned. And that'll provide also for more flexibility with some staff if they end up having to be out, if we have to change status with COVID or other options there. Just give us some flexibility with some of the staff that have the ability to work from home. Banking services, so we have a 30-day window to transition to the new banking. So we're looking hopefully to do that, start doing that next week. We do have to kind of sync it up with timing on the town's general checking account. We do have a couple, there's always some checks that don't clear for 2 months, 3 months, sometimes 4 months. So we have to account for some of that, and obviously we're going to still keep an account open at Camden, but figure out how much money is to stay in there. We have, of course, the big county check due at the end of this month.
So will we have to actually go to the bank to sign the signature cards, or can we do it here?
So I haven't had it. I've been to workshops and training that actually says the board members, when you have the form of government we have, shouldn't be signatories on the bank account.
Well, how can we sign the checks? That's different.
So that'd be the same thing, that the select board members in most towns, unless they're acting as the administrators or the staff, don't have signatory. They approve the expenditures and the warrant by signing the warrant. Now the signatures on the checks is done by the treasurer only after it's been approved by the board.
So then you don't have to sign checks anymore?
Right. So it's not giving up your right to approve anything, it's just,
We sign the warrant at the top like we do anyway, but then we don't have to go through and sign it. That makes more sense if there would be 5 less people that can sign checks, just for security reasons.
well, that was the point there that was brought up. And, you know, I think before there were town administrators or managers or paid staff, and again, some towns still do it because the board members are the staff in some more smaller communities. But where we're set up, it's just been explained to me that it shouldn't be, just because of the point you make. You got 5 more
I was just curious.
out there.
I don't have to sign a signature card and put my name on something, that's good with me. But it does make sense.
So we'll be doing that. They're gonna come out and train the staff on how to do the remote deposit capture. So that should hopefully be a smooth transition for that.
You said there's some kind of a terminal they're gonna give them that does that, or is it?
Yeah, so it's just a check reader basically. So it'll automatically deposit goes that day. And right now, as it is, we usually wait for a few days to do a deposit, so we can do it. Take it up with whatever frequency we want. So when we do that, we'll deposit the checks obviously into one bank and the cash that we have into Camden. And then if at some point we need to, we can transfer the money out of Camden to the first when necessary. The heat pumps have arrived, have been delivered. They haven't been installed yet. Niall had a couple other projects to finish up, but it's hoping to do those in the next few weeks. The electrician does still need to come back out to work at the sewer plant to get that set up for hookups, but Niall can do that work without that done prior to the visit. Terry Waters had called our office today, I believe, and let us know that one of the pilots noticed that someone or people have done donuts on the airstrip again. But it was still operable, but one of the pilots I talked to today did say it does need to be graded out or raked out. So I'll mention that to the guys tomorrow morning and see if someone can go up there and get that done. Just a reminder that, driving vehicles out on the runway is certainly not allowed. And the potential risk or damage that it can cause to the planes or people on the planes is just, it's unbelievable that that's something that's happening. And it's happened in the past. I don't know if
Is there a way to put a chain up across there so people can't drive on it after?
Yeah, so it's a matter of where do you terminate it, because that property is so wide open.
Yeah.
And there are some things that, I think we can come up with.
Well, I'm just assuming they're going up the road. I wasn't thinking about them going through the field.
There's somebody that lives there now?
There's, I think, 2 tenants in the house there now. I did talk to one of them today, and they said they haven't noticed anyone out on there. In the recent, this weekend or anything. So
2 o'clock at night and you're asleep, you might not.
right. You're not going to hear it squealing. There's no rubber pavement up there, so. But definitely a concern for the pilots and the passengers on there. It's not something that, I think there are some ways that we might be able to look at that, and I'll talk to the property owner to see if, together we can come up with something that's feasible and reasonable.
Motion lights.
Yeah. Down good look at it. Trailers at the fish plant, as I understand, has been slowly dwindling. Some people have removed them themselves, and some, I believe, have been being planned to be hauled off.
They hauled off a little today.
Great. So those ones that had left, you guys had talked about this, I think, at the end of August, I believe. So there's been ample time and notice for folks. It was put off for a couple of weeks. When we initially said it was going to get done, some had already left. The ones that were removed were unclaimed and unidentifiable. That's the key item. So there's no, they didn't see, when we looked at it, any VIN numbers or ways that they weren't registered. There's no way to identify the owner. And most of them looked as though they had, we need a significant amount of work to be usable again. So hopefully there's not a lot of controversy there, but it had been plenty of time to.
We've been there ample time, plenty of time.
We understand that it sounds like that could be delivered before the end of the month. And we'll be sure to, as we do in the past, and we usually reach out just to let folks know and give a day or 2 warning if we can. If they give it to us, we can give it to the community. Just a clear spot on the work there. So.
Any questions? Report numbers. I'm gonna go ahead. I have two things there. Okay, go ahead.
Obviously, the fire hall is not gonna get painted this year, but what was the last development since trying to find a contractor?
I'd asked Tony Jones if he'd give me he said he'd look at it and give me a price on it or a quote on it. I don't think I ever heard back, so I can circle back around on him again. I know there was he was gonna look at it, so there were some limitations potentially to what he would do.
What did you say?
So he was gonna look at it and let me know, because there may be some limitations to what he'd be able to do on it, so I'll follow back up with him and see if he had a chance to look at it.
I think I said at the last meeting that I had an inclination that they were thinking about doing away with the opportunity to put line cars in line in Rockland. And the inquiry that I had sent out that day to Mark came back, I don't deal in rumors. So I told him that I thought that was a good idea, but is there any truth? And I've never heard anything from him, which as far as I'm concerned is suspect. So, and I've notified other members of the board, the advisory board, and him that I'm not happy with not having an answer. But I do think there's reason to be concerned because we haven't heard anything and because he's been avoiding answering, which is unlike him, frankly. But it certainly would be a significant issue if it happened.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning behind that? Do you have any?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Parking lot, want to have too many cars in line or something, that not going on the boat.
But the fact is, it's understood that they shouldn't be making changes to the Rockland terminal parking lot without running it by the committee in the first place. That's what we're there for. So solicit input, if nothing else.
Right.
I fought this fight several years ago.
Huh?
That was a fight several years ago, a big one.
Yeah.
You remember it?
No, I don't.
Oh, when they put in the gate for the parking lot.
Oh, I thought you meant to fight about the same issue. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember
They
that.
didn't want one cars anymore. It was a big fight.
Should you vote on it first?
Well, hope we prevail this time too. The selectmen are waiting for the harbor study committee before taking further. What's the story with the harbor study committee? I mean, the harbor study.
So we've gotten some grant funding from the state to do a harbor study, and so it's about access and moorings, both, access to the water, but also the mooring field and either how it's laid out or, just understanding better and getting it mapped out today. So I've been unsuccessful so far, and I've reached out to at least 3 or 4 people. One said good luck, and the rest of them they've all offered input. So I think people are willing to talk about it and share the input, but not likely that there's going to be. So far, I haven't been able to get fishermen or mooring owners to be on the committee yet. So we'll continue to solicit and see if we can find 4 or 5 committee members for that.
For the harbor committee?
Well, for the harbor management plan, and we wanted to have a working group that the engineers and the person doing the study could work with or run information through, who then can reach out to the community. So I thought it would be best if we built up a committee, if you will, to work with them or share, stakeholders group, or whatever you want to call it, to work with the people putting the report together to make sure it was as accurate as.
But if he calls Jimmy must give him information if he needs it, right?
Yeah, between him and Pete, they're already going to be on it, but, presumably we want to reach out and make sure other mooring owners have the opportunity to weigh in and be part of the process, so it wasn't seen as the town just saying, this is the way it's going to be. So we just want to make sure that's an open discussion amongst the users. So I'll continue to look. If nothing else, then presumably if the board wanted to kind of help, be that input group potentially, or if you want us to just do it with staff help, we can just do it with staff. Hopeful that we'll get a few people.
I have a mooring in the harbor, but I don't ever use it. So.
Anything else, Bill?
No.
All right. Have you made any progress on the meadow and what we need to do as far as how that process would work out with the state and DEP and
What are we talking about?
up to the meadow the low spot in the road.
Oh,
You're talking about specifically blocking the flow, controlling the flow.
Yeah, or whatever the solution
Right.
it needs to be, so the road is not flooded, because it is happening, obviously, more and more.
They got one of those things that Gabe was talking about on that pole up there, so you can see how many feet.
Right. But, you know, I go up around the island road every morning before I go to home, and, you know,
Something better to do.
you can see that the road's wet often. You know,
We had talked about being able to close that culvert to some degree in 2020, and this is.
right.
that's an obvious solution.
Yeah, that's
Being able to close
an
it,
easy solution, yeah.
flood died, yeah.
But, you know, we just need to make sure that legally is all. So I just want to, you know, because it's a problem for us sooner rather than later.
I'm assuming that you can't just go and drop granite rocks in the ocean wherever you want either. That's probably a,
Well, you can. I don't know if you're allowed to. You can.
Yeah, I think that's an idea.
There'll be some permitting necessary to do that.
A gate you could close would just be such a sensible solution.
Yeah, that's sweet, sort of like home. North Haven and our relationship about our wind turbines and property taxes and all that, the TIF. Have you had any communications with Rick? Have you dropped any hints that?
I've talked with them about it, but I haven't wrote a formal letter to the board yet. I had reached out to Barb Hamilton to understand a little bit more about how that was discussed early on. I did look through the credit enhancement agreement and the TIF agreement, and it had some projections and models on there about the revenue modeling. Of course, the TIF was set up for the wind project to show a certain amount of revenue to offset whatever expenses there were. They were just projections, and of course, mill rates have increased, and that, you know, the value of those have stayed locked in. You know, there's a few things in there that we might be able to take back to the state and potentially renegotiate on that end of it. But otherwise, I've only just had, you know, just in-person or phone conversations with Rick so far. I haven't proposed anything or written anything for their board from you.
what can we do? I mean, how many years did we lock into that?
I
Forever?
think it was 30 years.
30.
2010, I think it was either 2000, I think it was 2010 when that was signed.
And there's no way to get out of it, or?
It can be modified, but it would require approval and drafting, so there'd be some legal fees to redraft it and approval from both, both parties, I mean, the town as well as the business that benefits from it.
So, well, did the rest of the board feel like it's time to send a formal letter to the North Haven Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, I agree.
And, and as we know, they're under no obligation to do anything, but who knows?
But presumably, how much in taxes would it be?
Yeah, we better at least try.
What would,
If they weren't in that, how much would they be paying in taxes?
All I can say is that we know that they have a value of X, and in fact, it's, the
Well,
tax
what's the value?
is on our mill rate, so it's 13 million, I think, was locked in at as a value, times whatever our mill rate is. So I don't even, if I could choose a number, if you want to give me more guidance on the proposal, if you will, from the board on behalf of this board to that board. I mean, like, we can continue to figure out what that is. I mean, just carte blanche, send them a letter. I'm not sure exactly, with the other things, kind of just trying to figure out still. There are other options I think we should also be considering in addition.
Other what?
Renegotiating the agreements to account for the fact that the values are locked in at a certain price, and no depreciation of those things, with no consideration for the increased mill rates. So it's, if you look at the projections, I was looking at it before, and I don't want to throw a number out there, but I was looking at, based on what we know today, at least looking back the last 10 years, what the difference in revenue has been for the company, the wind company, relative to what was projected, what it forecasting that forward based on the last 10 years rate changes, what that might look like going forward.
Were they favorable or unfavorable to those projections in their revenues? Talking about the wind, talking about projections for revenue, right?
Well, the way it's set up is it's locked in, no depreciation on the asset. So unless there's significant decreases in the mill rate over the next 20 years, all it is more revenue to the company and more into the TIF account that the town has. So I would think most would see that as negative, at least relative to what was thought it would be.
Yeah, obviously, the value of wind turbines is obviously deteriorating.
How can you-
Dramatically.
No depression.
Oh, and that's like that, it makes no sense at all.
And that's some of that, I'm not, obviously familiar with the discussions, but presumably the town agreed on a particular project enhancement agreement, and that's what was laid out in there. If any of you were at those, perhaps you might recall any of it, but
10 years ago, I was not at town meetings, no.
It's a legal document, spelled out between the town, which the voters would have had to approve as well. There were town meetings for that. And then, of course, the business entity would have approved, and the state has to be involved to approve as well.
Yeah, so we need to revisit that, because that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, okay, so,
But I mean, if it's a $13 million, at our mill rate now, it would be $150,000 or $60,000 in taxes that we could collect. I mean, our mill rate's 12 what?
It's 13.
Oh, I did it at 12,
No, go on, another
Yeah, so, I mean, so if we have Northaven to kick in a quarter, that would be, $40,000 or $50,000 a year.
I don't understand how the other town that benefits
Doesn't pay anything.
didn't have to pay anything. I don't understand how any of that.
I mean, when you set up the TIF, right, the TIF has to do the tax increment finance district to set up in the community that the asset's physically located in. Now, when it comes to an agreement between the two towns, that was just never, I don't know if it was ever discussed or not, but there's nothing that I know of that's in place now between the two towns to share in that. I did ask, and I was wrong in thinking that there was a different electric rate. It is the same electric. I thought maybe they paid a higher electric rate, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we need to revisit that one.
So is this still the prudent thing to do, do you think?
well, I think perhaps we should,
Talk to the town when.
yeah, first talk about renegotiating the TIF. And then after that, eventually we will include Northaven, they are beneficiaries without,
We can always just cut them off.
I mean, there's a switch.
Don't forget that the cable has to come from source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Country boy.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to the town when first.
Yeah, I think it's, all right, great. That's all I have.
I forgot to bring up the community access.
Yeah, bring up the community access.
So I did share, I think at the last meeting, just in Word, that PIA had proposed a community access program. I did send after that meeting the handout that they had provided. I didn't put it in a copy of it. And
That was what, $235 a flight they wanted to make, or $265?
Each flight now is $235. And so the concept is that there would be, if the town would, theory is the town would contract with PIA to have a flight or flights throughout the day or the week, or however the frequency might be to be considered. The town would be saying, we want to contract with these certain time slots for flights, and that they would be available to anyone that wanted to fly, first come, first serve. But what it would do for the customers, it would lock in, they would fly for $65. So they're able to access a cheaper flight. What it also means is that, whatever number of flights and whatever the town would commit to, any unfilled seat under that program as proposed would mean that the town would agree that they would still get X number of dollars. If you schedule one flight a day, for the year, that's $235 times $365, that's what's being committed to be paid, that they would receive that, under the assumptions and what they proposed. But if 4 people fly on a flight every day, on that flight every day, the town would have to provide nothing, that the revenue was generated by the passengers.
Well, it's only 2 people each way, right? Because they want $235 for the round trip, so, 65 to 130, and 2 going that way. You wouldn't need, 4 people, but it still seems like they should give us some kind of a credit, for if we have more, it just seems like it's not a great deal.
I don't see that.
If it's something that I'm not seeing, like, does the medical center need it for I mean, because they could chip in some too, you know, if they needed it for some of their employees to get back and forth, or the school, or, I mean, is there something I'm not seeing that it's needed that we have people get out here before 8:15, or, you know, and be able to stay, or have to get, I mean, is there something I'm not seeing?
No, I don't think it's the best interest of the town to.
Right, it should end up costing our town a lot of money.
Exactly. Why should we commit town dollars to something that we don't know is going to be fully utilized? So,
You know, I think.
Yeah, that's,
it should be, it's a commercial airline, and they make the money by
Mhm.
paying passengers. Why should the town be committing?
The best thing that could happen, in my opinion, is that people stop using the service and they have to talk about, you know, what the rates they're charging.
that obviously probably won't happen because people need to get, I mean, some people need to fly versus coming on the ferry, but I agree, I don't think we should plan on 2 trips a day, you know, if
Right.
it doesn't work out, we kick in the extra.
Right.
That doesn't-
$500 a day.
Yeah.
that probably wouldn't go over very well.
I think you're gonna find people that use it as a strictly convenience, not necessity. You know, they decide they want to spend them in 2 more hours one summer afternoon.
Or if you get stuck over there,
Then heck with it.
a hotel room is $150, and it used to be $130 to fly home, so it'd be like, well, it's cheaper to fly home, but now Hampton Inn, those places are gonna like it, because they'll get people.
Stay there, spend the night and go to dinner and see a movie.
Well, not right now.
I'll know, one day maybe.
I mean, it's a good, I understand it, it would be nice, but I don't think we can afford it.
I don't think it's, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, so their assumption is that they obviously recognize the price had to go up, but their assumption is, in proposing this, is that there's a number of people, whatever the number is, that, you know, will now not be able or choose, they can't fly, if you will, because the price is too much. And so it was about accessing a certain price point for a flight.
That's how it works in the regular.
This looks like market, it's called capitalism.
If you can't afford it, you can't use it. Like, why should we be chipping in to pay for that?
Oh, yeah.
I understand they're trying to generate more revenue and lock in the rate. That's fine, I get that, but no, I don't see the point in the town doing that.
Okay. Anyone else have anything else for a point number that they thought of? Any epiphanies?
my thing is about cars that park in front of the house if they don't have a parking spot, and they're in the road, and then I mean, how does that work? Why are they allowed to park if we pay to pave it? Why can they park in the road? I mean, are we gonna make some of these streets one way and charge them extra tax dollars for parking in the main road? I mean, it happens in more streets than you think.
Some of it would go to the, I think it's called the traffic ordinance or the parking ordinance, I can't remember which. I wish the town does have one. You know, I think it spells out what streets can or can't be parked on.
Okay, there, so it is legal then, maybe. I'm just
It happens in some places, but there is something there is an ordinance in place, just lacks.
Side street.
So
you have particular grievance against,
Well, I mean, I go to pick Drew up here on the hill, there's cars parked. I go to my house down by the ball ground, there's cars. I go over on some of these other side streets, there's cars parked in the road, and sometimes you have to stop. I'm just curious, like, why does the town pave their parking spot, not mine?
well.
I'm just curious if it's legal.
I think if it's a state road, it is against the law, but a town road, I don't,
I mean, for the state road through Main Street, obviously has some designated parking spots.
right.
I can't recall all of what the ordinance calls for, but there's an ordinance that does spell out what roads, what sides of what roads can and can't be parked on, at least can't be parked on.
You can barely fit 2 vehicles on the roads as they are.
Right.
So, yeah.
Some people have suggested that, you know, given the challenges certain times of the year at least, that perhaps, you know, should there be consideration for some of those neighborhood roads, if you will, to be one way?
Me, I said it once at a different meeting, that the road should be one way all the way down there in the summer, definitely, because of the flea market and
You can park on the sidewalks too, on School Street all the way down. You can't walk on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean,
But, I mean, there's a lot of side streets that people park in the street that I was just
No, I
curious
mean, the
about.
sidewalks and streets, same
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, no, yeah.
You're parking on the,
That's just, I mean, you have to stop more times than not to let other cars come in, you know, or it just seems like it's not the greatest plan to keep doing that forever, but
Something we can bring up in the.
I didn't know there was a parking ordinance or whatever there is.
no idea.
Well, it's partly on the sidewalk in the state, it's illegal in the state law anyway, regardless of the state law or not, right?
I think so. Crosswalks, I believe.
Yeah,
Should be.
bridges, sidewalks, and crosswalks.
I think if my understanding is, all that it requires is, someone to write the ticket, and then our town would be responsible for, if needed, processing and going through the court system if needed, to collect on those.
I think we should make some of these streets one way, I mean,
It says in the contract, sheriff's contract, that they do enforce local ordinances.
Right.
So how come we've always been told that they don't?
Well, that's a point for the newest contract to bring up and make sure they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, when we have
most streets in most cities are, in rural areas are one way because the streets are so narrow. They let people park on one side or the other, so just saying maybe we should look into making some of these streets one way and making, you know, a traffic flow instead of having people butting heads and stuff. I know people don't have room, these houses were built when there was horses and there's no room for them to park, but we should try and figure out a better system than, you know.
Well, if it's gonna make it safer to travel, especially in the summertime, we should definitely look into that, because someone is gonna get injured, so eventually, I feel it's only a matter of time.
That's all I had.
I'm over adjourned.
I just had one more thing, I just thought of it. The crosswalk going from East Main, going to school is kind of fading. Those slow and.
What crosswalk, Ben?
The one that goes across the street to the school lane.
Oh,
Arcola Lane, I guess, it's the school lane with the kids. But that crosswalk should be painted, and I think the slow on either end approaching.
Does the light still work if kids push it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think it does. The last time the kids pushed it, we'll try and make them, do that. So that, not that it doesn't always work. Sometimes you stand there, people go by anyway, so.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
I'm over adjourned.
Second.
Seconded by Donald, all in favor?